Okay, so today I'm going to be discussing some approaches for guitarists who are keen to understand how you might approach playing over key changes. Now, I create a fair bit of content for the LCM, or as they're probably more widely known, RGT guitar grades. So I thought I'd base this lesson around a chord chart from the Grade 8 Electric Guitar Handbook. But look, whether you're interested in doing guitar grades or not, it doesn't matter. This lesson is going to give you three practice approaches to help you as a guitarist learn how to approach playing over key changes. So firstly, please note that these are just approaches. There are loads of ways of approaching this subject. Chromaticism, pentatonic substitution, modal interchange, there's all kinds of angles you could take. But these are just approaches, and I think they're probably best suited for people who are relatively new to the idea of playing over key changes. So a couple of quick things, just make sure that any practicing you're doing playing over changes, so for example I've got a loop set up on my loop pedal and I recorded that using a click. It's very important that you make sure anything like this you practice playing in time. And secondly, today I'm not going to be talking kind of so much about techniques, lead guitar playing techniques. It's very much just focused on the idea of getting used to playing over chord changes. So I'm going to focus on a chord chart today which uses these chords, right? We've got A minor 7, D9, dominant 9, G major 7 and C major 7. Now they are all chords within the key of G major, so that's our first key center, the key of G major. It then changes when we move to C sharp, minor 7, F sharp dominant 7 and B major 7 for 2 bars. That is where we change, that's where we've changed key to the B major, so we're in the key of B major. It then changes the final time to B minor 7, E dominant 7, and A major 7 for 2 bars, and that is the key of A major. So we've got our 3 key centers, G major, then key of B major, then we've got key of A major. So those are our 3 key centers, and we're going to use that information to start with as a way of approaching how we're actually going to solo and play over the top. So I think when you're approaching something like this that is inherently pretty difficult and you're quite new to it, it's good to try to use something that you're kind of already reasonably familiar with. So that's why I think the first approach of using major pentatonic scales is a good idea. Now we're going to use those scales over our key centers. Now the reason I suggest doing that is not because I think major pentatonic scales are going to be as a vehicle for pinning down the chord changes and the harmony really well, because they're not really. But the key point is that you're trying to train your sort of brain and your ears to get used to the concept of playing over changes, playing over key changes. And it also will force you to make sure that you know the neck well enough. Now, so what I'm going to do to start with, I've got my loop going and I'm actually just going to play the pentatonic scale, major pentatonic scale of each key in a very sort of robotic, straight fashion. I'm just going to play up and down. Each pentatonic key, each key using the pentatonic scale. The key thing is I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep sort of even eighth notes, but I'm going to keep in position, right? But let me show you what that looks like. All right, so here's the loop. I'm going to go G major pentatonic first of all. So it's my G major pentatonic scale, just up and down. Here comes the key change. I move to B major, kind of just about works. And I'm just staying in position. Then I move to the A major for the second. Very straight. Okay, now that is just an approach. It's pretty robotic, it's not very musical, we're not necessarily creating music there, but as I said before, it's really key that you're training your ears and your fingers into this sort of idea of playing through key changes. Now ideally you would trial that idea all across the neck in 5 positions over the cage system. If you can do that, you're probably going to improve your knowledge of the neck as well. So I think that's your first step. So let me just try and make that maybe a little bit more musical. I'll try and sort of phrase a little bit more using the pentatonic scale. Okay, here comes my key change. Change. But you get the idea. We're just trying to make it a bit more musical, but that's how it can work. Now for me, the key changes don't work as well. It sounds a bit forced because we're not really targeting the notes. But as I said, the key point is not that. The key point is that you're training your brain and you're training your fingers to get used to the idea of playing through these key changes. So the second approach really just expands on the ideas of the first approach. Instead of using major pentatonic scales, I'm going to focus on using just major scales, which just really you've added 2 notes to each octave. Now, I think it's going to add a bit more colour to your sound and your phrases. So now I'm going to apply those major scale shapes through my 3 key centres. Again, just practicing playing them, you know, up and down, just straightforward way. I'm going to change position actually. So let me start with G major. Very straightforward. Here comes the key change. There's my key change to B major. Very straightforward, getting comfortable with it. A major, just about. And you might want to change the rhythm a bit. And just there's all kinds of things you could do. You can either play triplets or 16ths. But you know, the key is making sure you're comfortable with the shape, and again, as I keep saying, just that idea of moving between keys, you know, is really important. Okay, I'll try and make that sound a little bit less robotic. So just major scales. Comes my key change. My next key change. Sort of get the idea. It was a little bit over the top in terms of the playing, but that's the sound of the major scale in that context. You know, some of the notes, to be honest, you know, if you're not paying attention, some of them are gonna kind of just not sit as well. But again, it's just an approach and a way of getting yourself used to this idea of playing through key changes. So my third approach really for me is the holy grail of playing through key changes, and that's to use chord tones, right? Now chord tones are sometimes readily referred to as, you know, arpeggiating through the changes, or using triads, which is, you know, largely the same thing. What it is you're picking the notes within the chord, so you're gonna be using arpeggios. Now it's almost a surefire way of ensuring that you hit the right notes and you don't get any of those sort of dodgy notes that you land on, and that, you know, that's going to apply whether you're, you know, in a diatonic key or as you change key. If you're thinking about the notes of each chord as you're playing through the changes, it's pretty much definitely going to make your playing sound more melodic. Now it's also going to mean that you learn the neck even better, because you're actually thinking about the notes that you're playing and you're understanding the intervals and you know, the tones of each chord. So it's fair to say that this approach is the most difficult, I think, you know, to be able to target the notes within each chord as it changes key, and, you know, in one position and the next difficult. But we're gonna, you know, if you're not sure on your arpeggio shapes, you're gonna have to go back and learn them and get them sort of set in your head. But I'm going to apply it in the same way that I did with the pentatonic and the major scales. I'm going to just go through with the looper and just arpeggiate each chord. So here we go, starting with A minor 7. I may switch positions, we'll have to see. D9, G major 7, there's the key change. Switch positions. B minor 7. So there we have it. It's kind of a way of playing through. It's what it's going to sound like. It's quite difficult at times. I sometimes find that you sort of want to switch position just to mix the notes up. But that's the first thing you should practice, and then try it. You know, try connecting. You know, adding positions in and connecting them together. All right. So I'm just aiming to play chord tones over that progression. See what it sounds like. kind of gives you an idea. Obviously, you know, you probably, ideally what you want here is a mix of all three approaches, essentially. You know, you are going to be limiting yourself to one approach. But look, I think if you can think about how you're going to practice this stuff and the approaches I've talked about, it's going to improve your, you know, your knowledge of the neck. Absolutely. It's going to allow you to think more about, you know, in the mindset of playing through, you know, a key change and a chord change, and then eventually, you know, it's up to you to make that musical in the way that you want to be, whether, you know, it's kind of, you want to use your rock influences or blues or kind of the jazzier end of things. You know, that's kind of you, and that's what makes the musical side of it interesting. But I think from a guitar playing point of view, you've got to kind of have these approaches together, and then it's up to you from there where you want to go with it. Anyway, I hope that was of use today. If you've got any questions about any aspect of this or anything else, do let me know, and I hope to see you soon.